Join us as we open another file in the Markov dossier.
File number in Aurosperimus 320-201-32. File open.
Sir Luton, and welcome to this episode of the Markov dossier, a Dystopian Age podcast. My name is Scott, and I'm here with Sam.
Howdy, Pilgrims.
And we also have two very special guests with us.
It's my favourite time of the year. Autumn has turned the trees red and gold. The days are cold and crisp. The nights get longer. We have Halloween, bonfire night, and now the latest autumn tradition. And I don't mean pumpkin spice lattes. I mean brand new Dystopian Wars 2-player starter boxes from Warcradle. And here to talk about them are the Joint Admirals of the Fleet, Stuart and Chris. Good evening, lads. How are you?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Very well, thank you.
Right then. So, the release of Fortune and Glory, which we were so proud and privileged to open up first. Thank you for sending that to us first and letting us open that. Brings much needed air power to the Union and Sultanate factions, as well as creating the two new mercenary factions that anyone can use. So we know how well you plan well over a year in advance. So seeing this release and the great response must be really satisfying to that end process. How's it been going for you?
It's interesting because it's much like your own children to a certain extent, where you always, because you're seeing the progress every day, you don't see how much it progresses over that space of time. So when it comes to releasing it, it's just so natural and par for the course that it kind of, the fanfare and the kind of newness of it all is lost. So for us, it's something that we've been working on for a very, very long time, from the original concept through to the artwork and the sculpting and yada yada yada, all the steps that bring these wonderful miniatures to life. But it's almost like we're working on the next thing and the next cool thing and the next cool thing. So once the release date actually rolls around, we've not touched Fortune and Glory for 2 or 3 months. So it's an interesting one.
I actually thought you meant that it was like children in the sense that we have too many of them.
It's like that first day at school for you, isn't it? They've gone to school and you're like, oh, right, back home, let's go. Those models are incredible. Scott's showed me loads of up-close photos of what he's been doing with them. We recently saw that video behind the scenes of your design process, and we've seen the amount of work that goes into them with your designers and so on. So you mentioned this, but how long have they been in the pipeline, and where did you get the inspirations from? For example, I love the Union stuff because it's very Gotham. It's like the blimps out at the start of the Batman animated series. That's what they remind me of, and I love the designs.
Okay, so design inspiration was a combination of things. It's a combination of, we took cues from Americans, so United States airships, particularly the Akron and the Macon, I think it was the other one, which was their, just before the outbreak of the Second World War, the US ran dirigible aircraft carrier scout ship things, really, in our world. But they went out of service just before the outbreak of World War II. There's a whole conspiracy theory about, well, if they had still been in service, could Pearl Harbor have happened, etc., etc., etc. But that's a topic for another time, maybe. So in terms of overall shape, we knew that we wanted them to look different to the Prussian and Bavarian ships. So I think originally I'd kind of sketched out a bomb, like with more of the weight, whereas the Prussians are kind of
like an Acme.
Yeah, whereas the Prussians are kind of more evenly distributed across their whole length. I wanted something that was kind of front heavy and then had a kind of more pronounced tail fins, or that the tail made up a greater proportion of the body than with the Prussians, because it's important for us that these things have a different silhouette. It's the same reason why the Spanish airships look the way they do, is because, look, at the end of the day, it's a balloon. So you get a limit as to what shapes balloons can come in. And I think we're unlikely to have too many balloons in the game, because actually there is for different factions, because there is a limit to how many different weird and wonderful shapes you can start to get it before you start to get like circus animals and things like that made out of them. So obviously there was not Prussian was definitely a one of the design notes, and it was also about, we knew already that because of how the classic game had done a couple of the shapes, we knew that we wanted to create, which I think the community calls the double sausage, which is the two balloons one after another. So we knew that we probably wanted to explore that shape a little bit more, and then it was a case of looking at what we could achieve with the plastic kit and making it as versatile as possible, how many variants we could get. We also knew that we wanted to have the Honourable Eclipse Company, and that they would be aerial heavy, which would make them different to some of the other mercenary factions. Because again, in the same way that not Prussian is a legitimate note for the design, not Crimson League, not Black Wolf, not Scions of Jutland, each of the mercenary factions needs to occupy its own space. It can't just be, these guys are like these other guys, but they've just got slightly different looking ships. That they have to perform, because the difference is mercenaries can be taken for all factions. So in theory, if you are a crown player, there has to be a legitimate reason or a legitimate difference between the Black Wolf, between the Scions, between the Nautilus, between the Honourable Eclipse Company. They have to offer you different game choices. Otherwise, what's the point in having them as options? And that's why you're not going to see an infinite parade of mercenaries either. The mercenaries, there can't just be, it's not a case of saying, oh, and these are going to be the Empire mercenaries, and these are going to be, the mercenaries for the Enlightened, and so on. That's not the point. The point isn't to just come up with one for each of the factions. It's about coming up with something that they bring different to the game compared to other factions. So there's that featured into and made a difference to the design choices and influence there, but also then in terms of planning as well. So we had, in broad strokes, we have Dystopian Wars planned out not a year in advance. We have Dystopian Wars planned out probably about 3 years. 3-4 years is the, in general terms. Certainly in kind of conversation terms, we're well into 4th edition in terms of where conversations are, but that's a long way off. What happens is you half that 4 year path, and then you go, because 4 years is about the cycle, is about the life of an edition, or it should be for Dystopian Wars. That's what we believe. So that being the case, you kind of halve that, and the plan is then kind of a little bit more concrete. So about 2 years out from the current date, that's where we have a whole range of things that we kind of sketched out in terms of, okay, well, we're going to have this for Korea, and we're going to have this for the Spanish, and this for the Greeks, and this for, and so on. So we have these kind of broad strokes about what we're going to do and where. So for for about 2 years, Honourable Eclipse Company, Union aerial stuff, that kind of existed in that space. So largely, going back 2 years, largely about the time that we were doing Hunt for the Prometheus, we had the idea that this is where this was going to go, but it wasn't any more concrete than that. In terms then of miniature design and things, it's about a year out in terms of when that process begins. So, for example, Chris and I this morning were talking about, and we were kind of slapping each other on the back because we knew that we had 2024 miniatures. That was all done. It's done and dusted. We could tell you now, we're not going to, but we could tell you now absolutely what is coming out for all of the factions in 2024, because we know. Yeah, that's done. It's not a case of, oh, wouldn't it be cool if? It's a done deal. Wouldn't it be cool if is what we're then looking to do in 2025 and beyond.
The Union have got one very, and then a completely different look. We've got the Sultanate, very sleek and very beautiful. I honestly think they are some of the most beautiful ships we've got in the game now. The French have a rival. They are gorgeous. I'm so jealous of Scott for having those. I'm like, oh man, I want to be Sultanate now. But they're a whole different design. You've got a whole bunch of different other inspirations going on there. I feel like they wouldn't look out of place with sailing next to Jabba's barge, for example. I think there's a sort of Star Warsy feel to them. Where did you get those designs? Is it the same again? That some of them are harking back to the original edition, or was it did you pull from other sources for them?
No, I mean, in fact, these are far removed from the Ottoman aerial units that were in the original game, apart from the Lyceum, of course, which does take a lot of design cues from the original. But the Sky Cutters, etc., that you've got in the box are they've got a lot of design ethics and a lot of cues from the actual Sultanate surface vessels. So they've got the similar kind of broadsides, and the hulls almost look like they could be dunked in the water and they would float. So yeah, again, as Stu was saying, we wanted there to be some real differences between the two sides in this box set. So they weren't just, a whole bunch of aerial units, that the two factions were very identifiable and unique against each other, and you can see that I think we've achieved that. I hope so anyway.
Yeah, they're beautiful. The I hope I'm saying this right, the Alaska with the little sail on the side, that's genius. That is just such a lovely design touch. You've got a high temperature and it's got a sail on it. It's wonderful. I love that design.
Yeah, as Chris said, the Sultanate have much more in common with their wet navy counterparts than maybe the Union aerial and the Union Navy does. And again, that gave different design challenges. It was because if anything, it was slightly easier with the Sultanate, because you can use like similar bridges, similar as Chris was saying, the broadsides and the various kind of weapon mounts and things. Architecturally, they do look very similar. They've even got the nacelles on the larger of the airships have the kind of the nacelle units. It was also tying design things in, taking some design cues, not just from the Lyceum, but actually feeding back, because there's different sculptors work on different ships. It's not one sculptor that sculpts everything. And quite often, when one of them is finished, or one of them has kind of developed a particular aesthetic that kind of strikes a chord in the studio, that then gets reapplied back across the range so that we make sure that it's cohesive. So each artist, they don't work in isolation. In fact, Chris, as part of his role, he makes sure that he has a design roundup, very, very, multiple times a week, to make sure that everybody is on the same page with things. But yeah, it's about giving the artists the ability to kind of innovate. Roberto Cirillo, the studio art director, is obviously giving initial direction and kind of following and giving feedback to the concepts and things as he has kind of developed them with myself and Chris to begin with. But then the artists are then free to kind of innovate and tweak and interpret those designs how each of them feels. But then there's an important coordination role, which is a key part of what Chris brings to it, which is making sure that those designs then aren't completely in isolation, that there is then kind of a cross-pollination of some of the aesthetic choices, so that they then all look, by the time they get broken up and laid out on the frame, that they all do look like they are all part of the same, not just the same faction, but actually that they all belong together on the same frame as well, that they're contemporaries of each other. And that's a key part of the design process. It happened with the Union, with the aerials, although slightly differently, because there's very little that connects the Bogota and the Union airships together. They're both in the air, but obviously one is a rotor and one is a dirigible airship, so there's not a great deal that kind of connects them in. But still, there are some sort of design elements and things that we had to make sure that we were being true to what had come before, maybe not in the same frame, but what had come before. So, for example, the Akron clearly has a lot of influence on the Bogota. It's smaller choices, like the big thing about the Union is that they have the paddle wheels. Well, you can't put a paddle wheel on an airship. We managed to do it on a submarine, but an airship really is a bit of a stretch. But there are other ways that you can kind of interpret that. So again, the airships have got those four rear turbines. And again, they've been done sympathetically to kind of like pseudo paddle wheel idea. And the Acrons have their rotors. And again, we've made sure that those rotors at least kind of have that circular shape, which kind of reinforces again the idea of the paddle wheel thing, so that they all even together. Yes, they don't have as many direct aesthetic as the Sultanate does, but you would still see those various craft all together on the tabletop, and they would look like they are related to each other.
If I was to twist your arm and make you pick one, could you pick a class that you can build from the new sprues as one that you really like the look of? Is there anything in particular that you're really drawn to from the new Union and Sultanate sprues?
It's a real tough choice.
It is.
I don't know. I mean, for different reasons, if you really were to twist my arm, I would say the Sultanate skyships are probably my favourite. I just think they look so elegant, and they've got a real, I don't know, it's just a anachronistic feel to them that I really enjoy, that kind of sets the Dystopian Age apart from other games. You've got this ornate, glorious wonder of engineering and architecture that's drifting through the skies and raining fire down on their opponents. And I think I'd have to choose that.
So that's interesting, because for me it's probably the Custodian or the Excelsior. I think are probably my favourite. I like the larger of the Union airships. I think they've done a really great job in kind of balancing up the air cruisers. I like the way that the prow's done with that, especially with the Sentinel generators that are on the front of the Custodians. I think they look really cool. I like how they work in the game, and I like how visually how they work. Probably the Custodians, particularly as well. I really like the Honourable Eclipse Company. I think they're an interesting mercenary group in the game. I particularly like the corporate shenanigans of their leader, Silus Hodge, the Executive General. I think probably the Custodian is probably my favourite.
I'm glad you mentioned Silus, because that leads very nicely into my next question. What can you tell us about Silus and the Honourable Eclipse Company? Because at the moment we don't have a fluff piece, unless it's in the new rulebook, because I haven't seen it, because Scott's got it. What can you tell us about him? Who is he? Where's he come from? And so on. The little bit we've had about the HEC puts them as the white hat, or that's their public image, the white hat mercenaries there to serve and protect. But what can you tell us about them?
In kind of broad terms, Silus is a former Union officer, served during the Oil War, was a relatively junior officer, didn't see action, but always dreamed of seeing some action and serving his country. When the war ended, before he got his opportunity to make his mark, there was a combination of contacts and fortunate postings that basically he became well placed to take advantage of the arrival of the aerial advent, as it were, for the Union. And what he then eventually got himself into, he decided that as he felt the Union weren't, or the Union military weren't giving him the opportunities that he felt he richly deserved, that he would effectively create his own pseudo Union and shape it as he saw fit, one that would give him the rewards and the reputation and respect that he felt he deserved. You can see on the art, he's depicted on the front of the Union orbit. You can see that is the Honourable Eclipse Company. Well, he's got something a little bit more ostentatious, but the essential Honourable Eclipse Company is like a dark blue Union, almost Union. It's slightly darker than Union blue trousers, and then with a black waistcoat or kind of a tunic, but then a white undershirt, again giving that kind of that eclipse image. But they're very much, at a glance, you might confuse them for Union soldiers or Union Minutemen. And certainly his uniform and even his title, Executive General, it's all self-appointed. He has a kind of a chest full of campaign medals, but there would be campaigns that the Honourable Eclipse Company has carried out and has acted in. They're not ones that he earned in service during his own personal career. This is things that his company have earned. These are battle honours that his company has earned in the various contracts that they've undertaken for the Union and other nations. He has an ego, and he demands to be given the credit and the respect that he felt he's always been due. So, yes, he's not dishonourable. I mean, there's a danger that you end up making everybody a swine in the game, and that's not true. But he's certainly a bit vainglorious. He certainly preens a bit, needs to be given the opportunity to shine. But as long as his ego is being pandered to, and as long as his Honourable Eclipse Company are given an opportunity to shine and show that they are the heroes that they aspire to be, then they are a force that you can rely on. They aren't going to back out of something because somebody offers them more money or anything. They do have a reputation. Most of their contracts are with the Union, but they do undertake work for the other great powers. It's rare that they will undertake work that will directly put them into conflict with Union interests, and even rarer that they'll take work that will put them directly into combat against Union forces. But it has happened. It's not unheard of. But yeah, they're solid, and what the Union appreciates about them is that they can operate at an arm's length, so that the Honourable Eclipse Company can be deployed in something that might otherwise the Union might not want to directly become involved in, because it potentially destabilises the balance of power in a particular region, but that the Union has interest in a particular region, and so those two things don't become mutually exclusive.
Excellent. The princess's backstory, we've got that already from the Cyclone of Shadows story. What I found interesting was at the end of the Cyclone of Shadows, clearly there was some plot development going on with the princess and her brother. There was mention of a secret meeting and so on. Are we going to be seeing that develop in future releases? The effects of that? Have you got a story arc for your characters?
We do, but so Silus is going to be. So we have another campaign which is midway through development, which we will hope to launch at some point next year, which is the Ghosts of Midwinter, which will be. So Cyclone of Shadows was in 1874, Ghosts of Midwinter is in 1876. And it's a sequel to Cyclone of Shadows insofar as it takes place 2 years later. Well, technically, a Cyclone goes right up to the end of 74, and Midwinter starts right at the beginning of 76. It's only about 13, 14 months between the two. But so it is a sequel in that regard. But the reality is that there's plenty of planet, there's plenty of nation sort of gerrymandering and finagling and all sorts of things by lots of different people. If you stick with the same handful of characters for too long, you do end up making the dystopian world feel quite small, because there are billions of people on the planet, and okay, not every one of them is going to be living an extraordinary life, but there's enough stories out there with enough different people that we want to. So there are. We had, Chris, is it 16? There were 16 characters, weren't there? That were 16
in Cyclone.
Yeah, in Cyclone.
16
yeah.
Cyclone of Shadows.
Yeah, so we have 24 new characters that are introduced in Ghosts of Midwinter. Silus is one of them, but there are 23 others. So, yeah, it'll be... and some of them are names that we've seen before, so people like Tesla, people like Sturgeon and so on, but we haven't maybe really had a huge kind of spotlight moment for them, and so Ghost of Midwinter will bring some familiar faces, including a couple that you would probably be surprised to see in Dystopian Wars, and also a whole host of new characters who are new to us as an audience, but some of them have been kind of invested behind the scenes for a long time. The Sultanate has 3 new characters that are introduced, each one of them with an important role to play. So while Princess Sherazade has a role in the story, she's mentioned and she does feature a little. It's not. This one isn't going to be her story. It is going to be focusing on these other characters and also on her brother, who apparently has some sway in the Sultanate. So it will feature him and some other characters too, and of course the Order.
Boo. That's everything I wanted to hear, and I'm very glad to hear the phrase "Ghosts of Midwinter" because there's a tease for that if you look for it in the Orbats.
Yeah.
So, what I want to talk about now is the civilian sprues that have come in there. More gameplay possibilities, and I love all the build options. Scenarios in Fortune and Glory, of course, make use of them. Are we going to be seeing more official scenarios for those that make use of them in the future?
Funny you should say that. Actually, it's a very good segue because Ghosts of Midwinter will feature a significant number of encounters that will use the civilian ships in more of an active role.
Excellent.
To answer your question succinctly.
Yes, it does. So yeah, there's stuff coming for the civilian ships. Again, those are great designs. Some lovely design cues taken from real ships of our world, and there are many different options for them. I think when people get them and realise the different ways you can build them, the different looks, you've got both long and short versions of them, as well as flying and sea. And you've got 3 versions of each. So you've got cargo, passenger, and oil for each. So it's about 12 different models you can build out of that, if I've got my maths right. So we're looking forward to seeing those as scenario pieces, and we're really looking forward to seeing what people are going to do with that. Obviously, you've got escort duties and so on, which clearly the HEC with their shield generator is going to be really good at, which is obviously a nice tie-in there. This is the question I'm going to ask, because unless I've missed it, we've not seen the stats for the civilian ships yet. Are they due? Until a lot of people are wondering that one, or have I missed it in the...
You haven't missed it, no.
Okay, good. I do miss things. But I imagine they're coming in the next few weeks, let's say.
No, they're not coming in the next few weeks. Why would you put civilian ships in your fleet?
For the... I was thinking from a scenario point of view and things like...
But that would be in the scenario. That wouldn't be in your...
That'll be in the... That's the scenario. Okay. That's what I'm thinking. This is what I haven't seen the scenario book because someone's not given it to me yet.
No, sure. But, okay, so for example, at some point there will be rules in the Orbats for taking troop transports and things to help with like landing operations and so forth. Yes, that will be something that you can have in your fleet. But most of the other things that you're getting in there are more scenario and, it's like protecting shipping lanes. I mean, the merchant fleet, the commerce and, trade, shipping and so forth, that is the lifeblood of the dystopian age. Without that, the great powers, all of them, including the Enlightened, would collapse within months. They need... So anything that threatens shipping is of paramount urgency and concern to all of them. So really, they are vitally important objectives and things to play your encounters with. They're not really... it's not, shall I take this squadron of destroyers or shall I take these 4 merchant ships? It's not really that kind of a tactical choice for you. Always take destroyers.
So you did mention the landing scenarios, and there are landing tokens in the game. Is that a scenario that we can be expecting sooner rather than later?
No.
Fair enough.
Again, we've already established what the pattern of things is, but I appreciate it's only the first time we've done it, so you can't see the pattern. But because Chris and I and the rest of the studio are working kind of multiple years, we can already see, okay, well, this is what we're doing with this one, and then we're going to do our 3rd campaign, and then we'll do a 4th campaign, and so on. When we did the organised play rules, the Admirals League, we made sure that we had a whole set of encounters in there. We also made sure that we had a load of new rules that kind of expanded things like terrain interactions, fog of war, and all sorts of cool stuff like that. there is a whole bunch of stuff that is going to be in Ghosts of Midwinter, but at the same time that Ghosts of Midwinter comes out, we'll have the new year, the new season for the organised play. We're going to do a new organised play Admirals League, Admirals Tournament every year, which will have new encounters in it, a load of new rules to try out, and optional expansions and bits and pieces. And one of the ones that the season and Ghosts of Midwinter will be dealing with landing actions and things that have the landing vessel rule. There's a whole set of encounters that just revolve around that and establishing beachheads, and that's how you score and win the game. So that's going to be a big part of Ghosts of Midwinter, but it's also a really, really big part of next year's organised play. So when this current year, so the 2023 season comes to an end, when we launch the 2024 season, which isn't going to be January 1st, it will be at some point next year, then that will have a whole bunch of new encounters in there and a whole bunch of, new rules and things that will really showcase the landing actions, the merchant shipping as objectives and so forth. So all of that is to come, but it's not going to be for a good few months yet.
I like that. I really like the rolling season. It sort of helps to keep people engaged and playing games, because you always want to try those new scenarios and go to tournaments and see how they fare at those and that sort of stuff. So that's really cool to hear. The other thing I was going to ask was, so you mentioned sort of at the beginning that you're 3 years ahead of Dystopian Wars. Does the lore fit in with that? Have you got the lore planned out for the next 3 years, or is that like all set, concrete, ready, or is it constantly evolving?
It's very much broad strokes at that kind of distance out, and as we get closer, things start to firm up, and it allows us to have good framework to work towards and have an understanding of what we hope to do and what we plan to do at those times. But we keep it quite fluid, and we kind of move things around as we realise that a certain faction might need a bit of loving, or they haven't had a release for a little while, so we'll switch things around and speed something up, get one of those plates spinning that's been kind of languishing to one side, and get that into play. So that 3 years is definitely things that we anticipate and that we have some broad strokes for, and then as we get closer to it, we'll tighten those up and get more meat on the bone.
It's also good because the narrative for the dystopian age is interconnected. As we look at other corners of the dystopian age, it's useful to kind of pull on narrative threads that we might have established in other areas and kind of explore those. And certainly Ghosts of Midwinter, so next year's narrative, definitely pulls on some threads that have been kind of laid in there about 4 years ago,
if not longer.
Well, yeah, possibly longer, and certainly before Dystopian Wars. And we're really going to explore some stuff that I think will make long-term fans of the dystopian age and what Warcradle has been trying to do quite excited, quite pleased.
I'm not sure if you can tell, guys, but we are really trying to rein in our excitement on certain areas of the upcoming campaign book.
I'm trying to. Obviously, I'm not going to mention, but it's interesting again. And Chris is absolutely right about things firming up, because some of the big moving pieces that we had planned out for the 1876 events, we knew about that quite a while ago, but it was only as Chris and I were kind of pushing pieces around and kind of mulling things over and seeing where logically certain things, that a particular character told us what was happening with them effectively, and it just made sense that a particular character who we had established, and it's not we didn't know what to do with them, we knew what we were doing with them, but it turned out that what we planned to do with them wasn't what this character was going to end up doing. So this particular character has now taken on, from a kind of an interesting role in 1874, has now got a rather pivotal role in 1876. So yeah, sometimes the narrative genuinely takes a sharp turn in a way that we didn't expect or anticipate, particularly now that we're dealing, and I'm so pleased that we are, now that we're able to deal with characters, not just big monolithic political blocks. We can actually deal with people, so there's much more nuance and interesting things that can happen there. And as I say, one of those characters has now moved into an area that we weren't expecting, which is interesting because I thought that the characters that we did know what we were doing with in 1876 is going to send seismic shockwaves through the dystopian age. But apparently the dystopian age still had some surprises for the studio as well.
You're trying to rein your excitement in. I assure you I'm excited for all four of us right now. Yes! Good stuff. Okay.
It's very exciting.
I'm literally bouncing up and down on my chair and not sitting still very well right now.
I think it's worth sort of mentioning that you are going to start doing your own official podcast soon. How long before we can hear the first episode? Because I'm quite interested to listen to the official podcast myself.
First two are in the bag. We're looking to launch them. I mean, it's worth saying it's going to be different. We wanted to do something which was different to what other people were doing. So, for example, we're not reviewing sets. It's not really an interview format so much. We may do interviews in the future, but it's not like this. You guys do this kind of thing really well. We aren't looking to do the official version of this. It's basically the Element 270 podcast it's essentially Chris and me and others sitting around and chewing the cud for about 25 minutes, half hour on a subject. And it'll be, it's related to Warcradle and usually related to one of the games or multiple games, but it's just us kind of bouncing back and forward. So I guess it's more of if you happen to be at a table in a bar or a pub sitting next to Chris and me or Parker and Chris or whoever the combination of people is, and just having a chat and just kind of exploring thoughts on things. Nothing political, let's say. It's all gaming based, and specifically Warcradle gaming based. We don't wax lyrical too much on bolt action or anything like that. But yeah, it's two or three people just chewing the cud and mulling over things. We've talked about events and activities. We're talking about friends and things that you may have encountered in life through gaming. We talk about all sorts of sort of social aspects. We talk about, funny enough, we do talk about 2-player starter sets and things. So yeah, just all sorts of different topics. And the great thing is as well is there's an opportunity for people to suggest topics for us to talk about, and then we will have a ruminate on those too. And again, at some point maybe we'll have one or both of you on the Element 270 and we'll chew the cud with you guys about stuff in general. So not specifically, okay, we're going to talk about this particular product. It will be kind of a more kind of general conversation about things.
Sounds really interesting. Like I say, I'm looking forward to listening to it. It will be going onto my listen list as soon as the first couple of episodes drop for certain. So I just thought I'd give you an opportunity to talk about it and get people to sort of know what it's going to be about. So.
If you find us waffling on deeply boring, which, like for example, our bit of this podcast, then you really probably don't want to listen to Element 270 because that's pretty much all we're doing, isn't it, Chris?
More or less.
Sounds good to me. I think we should probably ban Sam's cat from it though, because
I don't know. Everyone loves cats, right?
That's true.
It wouldn't be the Markov dossier unless she turned up, but honestly, I do everything to make sure she doesn't do this, and she still comes in and goes, I'm not happy with the world.
They do as they please, don't they? Let's face it.
She's just glaring at me from the kitchen door at the minute, going like, why haven't you fed me yet? Because you already have been fed. No. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the Element 270 podcast. I can't wait for those first episodes to drop. I will definitely be putting them on my playlists as well. So, we'd like to thank you once again, lads, for joining us. It's always a privilege to have you on and always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure to be here.
We can't wait to see what's coming next. Obviously, this week we'll find out what the last releases of this year are before the long bleak December of no Warcradle stuff. Oh, I'll just have to buy some more stuff from what was already out, but then back into January and new stuff. Oh, it's always good. So, thank you ever so much for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Our pleasure.
File number in Spirimus 320-201-32. File closed. Agent Markov remains at large.
Does he remain at large? I've been meaning to ask you, is he still alive?
You see, you should have asked us, because he's in Ghosts of Midwinter.
Oh, wow.
Yes! I didn't want to ask that one. I thought that might be going too far, but yes, he's still alive.
That is exciting news.